This is Urban Innovate Talks with Dr. Henriette Cornet.
Hi, William. Nice to have you with us today.
Hi, Henriette. Thank you, and very happy to be here with you.
Great. Yeah, we have a bit of a history of podcast recording together. It's our second episode, let's
It is
say.
actually, yeah.
And we were discussing before that it has been a while already, so things have evolved a lot in the world of autonomous vehicles. Exactly, but it's a pleasure to have you back. And for the listeners who don't know you yet, I wanted to invite you to have your view as an operator. And you'll tell us more about your experience in public transit, etc. But really, for me, you are the specialist experts on really fleet operation, fleet supervising, monitoring, all these words that we are hearing all the time, and there are confusion sometimes. Mostly, we will tackle the idea of safety, of monitoring safety, demonstrating safety maybe as well, and also monitoring performance. So that's kind of the agenda for today. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. But before jumping in all these topics, would you mind introducing yourself and tell more about what you are working on?
Yeah, very quickly. So I have experience in the automotive industry. I worked in Renault and Stellantis in my early career, and then moved to Transdev. So worldwide big public transport operator back in 2016 when AVs were kind of the shiny thing that was going to disrupt mobility. Today, at Betty, small regional operator at the beginning, but we turned the strategy to really be in the middle between the AV providers and the local ecosystems, operators, and authorities. What I'm looking forward to is to digitalize daily operations. What I saw in my previous career and all the years in the AV field is that you have AV providers. They are really good at creating and designing self-driving softwares globally. And then you have local operators that know how to manage drivers and vehicles. But they are non-tech industries and service companies. They need to digitalize how to integrate those vehicles. So kind of connecting the two words and make them work together to disrupt mobility and improve shared mobility in the future. That's what drives me on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a big topic, the shared mobility.
Yes,
you are very much in the shuttle area, right?
Yeah, shared mobility is our thing. We're trying, to improve mobility and use that particular technology to improve shared mobility.
Mm-hmm. So when you say digitalization of the services, what can you dig already into that, what you mean with that? And mostly what strikes me when you say that is, isn't it digitalized already, or what's missing? Or how is it done today? Or what's the part really that you think that needs more of this digitalization?
Yeah, in fact, when you go inside a local operators, it's a lot of human task. You have people charging the vehicle, you have people driving, you have people reporting what they did. Are they late or okay for the emissions? They are reporting the issues. They are reporting what's wrong with the vehicles, etc. So it's a very human job. When you integrate self-driving vehicles inside those fleets, you don't have the driver or you don't have this feedback to manage your service and your performance on a daily basis. So you need to have some kind of data from the vehicles, from the field, to manage your service and to improve it and to meet your contract with the authorities. That's why it's basically what we're providing today at Betty is field applications for the operators to guide them through the vehicle preparations to the declaration of what's wrong during the services. And then after the service, dashboard to see a standard data to assess the service, the security, the safety, etc. And a platform for the control centers. I won't talk about, like you said, supervision, hypervision, remote, everything you can say, but control centers. Okay, let's say like it's for metros, buses, planes, etc. You have control centers. We need them, and we're building that platform to gather all the functionalities the local operators needs to manage their service. What we're building is this platform to manage every aspect of your service, the driving, but also the journey of the passengers, the field, and the alerts from the system. So the 4 big aspects of the service has to be managed at any time during a service.
Okay, let's dig a little bit more into all of that, or let's decompose the different things that you said. And you said the big word of data. I think that's central here. So I'm sure everybody, people who are listening to this episode now, are familiar with the data and the AV type of data that we hear. Being the most important one is the number of accidents, the incidents. There have been some happening with autonomous vehicles. Some have led to companies stopping their operation entirely. Some have led to pet being killed. So many things like that will make the headlines in the press and affect also the public discourse around them. We hear the topic of disengagement, so that's also maybe something we should talk about more. What exactly is meant with that and why is important. But the way I see it is we have all this data. I mean, we could collect so many data, right, around the vehicles and anything that's happening. But the big question for me is why, what for, what do we want to do with this data? And mostly, and also who wants the data for what, so to say. Both goes together. Yeah. Because sometimes I have the impression in all the discussions ongoing is the regulators will need data to give approval for a service to be deployed, either on the vehicle side or on the commercial deployments, like it is done in California, but in other states and in Europe is kind of similar, the separation between vehicles and service, to give the permission. But then it goes so far that for me, it looks like they are acting as operators almost, trying to supervise the fleet, asking for more and more and more data. And the good example, and I want us to dig into this document, the document from SFCTA, where they propose kind of a conceptual framework for safety, etc., where it goes so far, then it touches an area where I'm like, should this data be public actually? Is it too much detail? Will it also kind of slow down the willingness of company to deploy in certain parts of the world if these type of requirements are so high? And then talk to you about the role of an operator, so the role of a third party that could play something a bit more transitional. And I'm sure here what will play a big role is the fact that in US we have these market-driven fleets like Waymo, Zoox, and we hear every day about new cities where these vehicles will be deployed, where no public transit agencies is involved. The cities are not involved. It's really purely market-driven and like Uber-like service. Whereas in Europe, the shuttle services that are happening, super interesting, are more embedded into transit service, where there the operators have kind of a more natural role. But you see where I'm going. So who should collect the data, what for? And so it's huge. So
huge topic. I wrote down like 4 or 5 different things where we can deep dive. Maybe first, the first thing you said, maybe it will slow down things if we ask for data or too much data. And I want to emphasize what you say, the difference of approach between the US and China and Europe on the other side. Without telling, is it good or bad on one side? I'm not taking any part of that, or maybe later. But first, there's really a different approach there. In the US, companies like Waymo, Tesla, etc., they have their own safety demonstrations and they go on open road when they think it's safe enough. In Europe, and it's not linked to AVs, it's exactly the same for driven vehicles. When you put a product on the market, you have to homologate it beforehand. So before you put an AV on the open road, on commercial services, you will need to homologate and so demonstrate the safety concept, demonstrate that it's safe enough to be put on open road, that it's as safe as a human-driven vehicle. It's not only the design of the vehicle, but you have to illustrate and convince that your safety management system is consistent enough to be safe and to have people on board. So it's really different. all these questions, all the data, you have to provide them if you want to have a commercial service in Europe. That's the European approach. Basically, the philosophy is to protect consumers. In Europe, we have those regulations beforehand.
But it's really on the vehicle side, correct?
Yes, on
the
the vehicle
homologation
side.
type approval is really on the vehicle.
Actually,
it doesn't
you
say
have,
much about the
and
service.
it's really step by step. You have a European type approval that homologates the vehicle, so the platform and the autonomous driving system, and then a deployment certification by a third party. So you'll have to declare where, if the ODD matches the generic ODD of the vehicle that is homologated. So there's really two different steps: generic vehicle homologation and then deployment certifications.
But if I may pose you here,
Yeah.
in the US, the unique thing is this self-certification, but the construct is kind of the same. They also have the vehicle standards that they have to apply for the vehicles. And now it's in a gray area where these standards don't exist yet for AVs, same as in Europe. It's like progressing, but it's not absolutely completely there yet. They have all these standards for the vehicle, and then at state level, they will approve their commercial deployment. So I see a lot of similarities in the approach.
Indeed.
But funny enough, the type of services that are deployed are very different.
Very different. Yeah, you're right. We see less robotaxi and more shared mobility, public transportation in Europe, where you mainly have shuttles running. That may be historic because we had shuttle providers in Europe, but also because the market for public transportation is higher. I would say it's market driven. It's what we have on each side.
Tell us a bit your view on the data that is needed, in your opinion, to assess safety, not from a regulation perspective. Maybe we can let that a little bit apart, but more like on a daily basis from an operator. How do you still make sure that the rides are safe for the riders? And how do you measure, I think that's also so important, the topic of performance, like quality of service in general, and make sure that there is a benefit to use this technology after all. And so how do you distinguish both? What's your view on that? And can you share, really don't hesitate to be detailed about kind of the routine to be put in place and what type of data exists already, which data are harder to get. But please share a bit on the shuttle, really, on your experience.
Operations, yeah. So first, I would distinguish three kinds of data or three kinds of contexts where we need data. The first one that is quite obvious is when there is an accident. So there you have to share all the context to understand and to make sure that you put something in place so that it doesn't happen again. Then second context for the operator to manage the service, as I said. So here you will need a lot of real-time data that you don't need to process a lot or extrapolate, but just to manage your service. So I don't like to say real-time, it's at any time, because as you're not driving remotely, you don't need to have data like 5 milliseconds. It can be longer. The latency can be longer, but you need, for example, the video stream for the passengers. If there's something happening in the vehicle, you need to react and they can call the control centers, and you can exactly like in the elevator or in the metro. You also need the data from the health status of the vehicles. For example, you have an issue with the doors that cannot close, or you have the battery that is caught in fire, or you have the tires that is off. You need to have this kind of information to react, to restore the service and reassure the passengers. You need to have the data from where the vehicle is, the data of what's the state of charge of the vehicles, to be able to dispatch it to the next mission, to the next line, or to say, okay, go back to the depot so we can integrate another vehicles. And we need to have the feedback or the request from the driving stack if it needs some help from the remote operators. So that's the second context, to daily operate a service at any time. The third context, and the one that is really interesting for me, is what data you need constantly to assess, monitor, and improve your service. We talked about regulations and safety. In safety, when you design a system, the safety lies in your safety management system. It lies in 3 different pillars. The design of the system, so you design your vehicle to be safe. Then you have the operating procedures. You know, in the aircraft industry, the instructions for the pilots are also very important for the safety. And the third pillar for the safety management system is the monitoring and continuous improvement. You need to have the best safety possible to constantly monitor and improve the system. So for that, we have this generic dashboard to monitor first the global view of the service, mainly for insurance company, for local authorities. So it's really an overview. And basically, it serves to measure the exposition of risk and split the liability. So we'll have to know the number of kilometers we did, the average vehicle speed, the number of passengers we moved, and who was driving. Is it on auto mode or manual mode? And to split liability, you have to track the human interventions. It's very easy for an AV providers to say, there were an intervention from a human. It's not my fault. It's your fault. If you don't have the data, you're completely blind and you don't know. You depend completely on the tech providers. So you have a lot at stake here to have a clear, transparent data to know and to be able on both sides to know who was driving and who had, intervened in the service. It's my job to make sure that the technology I use and how I use it is safe enough. So the first part of that continuous monitoring and improvement, the first part is so illustrating the exposition in kilometers and passengers and trying to be clear, transparent on the liability. Second part would be to illustrate the performance. And here the metrics can be very simple. What I use is the exact same metric that we use in public transport operations with driven vehicles, punctuality, availability, etc. So the exact same metric than driven services. The third part of the dashboard that I'm focusing on to constantly monitor the service and the system is on security and safety. And it gets interesting here. So it's basically all the emergency stop, all the takeovers, all the overrides, etc. And as you said, it is sometimes very difficult to get those kind of data.
Yeah, because it's saying a lot about the manufacturer, the ADS provider, etc.
Yeah, it says a lot. It's funny when you say that. I saw a communication hearing of one big AV providers in the last weeks, and they publicly said, I won't release those kind of data because it will show my competitors, my performance. From my point of view, it's not showing how you do things. It's not a secret IP. It's just a way to measure the performance. So the clients, operators, and local ecosystems can know with full transparency if they can use it at larger scale or not. And it's just transparency. And you can have different performances between competitors, and with any product on the market, usually you can see the performance, and some trains goes faster than other trains, but they feel the user experience is better, or the feeling of safety is better, or anything. So from my point of view, it should be transparent, and that's something that
publicly available.
Yeah. After that, I don't display those kind of things publicly, but as an operator and as the integrator of the system, we need that to know where we can push. So stops, human interventions. And the last thing I have in this dashboard is the human feeling. Today, we have safety operators on board, and they can declare if the feeling is not safe. For example, the vehicle doesn't yield as expected, or the trajectory feels unsafe. So there is no accident, there is no incident, but the feeling is not human-like or not safe enough. And for me, it's very important because one funny story, when I started to track those interventions, I won't say what company, but one company were filtering the interventions. And they told me, no, we run it into simulation. And if you operators didn't push the emergency stop, there wouldn't have been any accident. So we don't count it as interventions. Say, no, but if the
it's
operators
problematic.
feels he needs to stop the vehicles, it means it's not ready enough to go. Maybe it would be safe in the sense that there is no collisions, but that's, the angle you take. When you develop a software for driving, you're looking for avoiding collisions. When you're looking at an operational perspective, you're looking at managing the security of your passengers. So not putting your passengers in dangerous situations. It can be from the software, it can be from the vehicle, it can be from outside, it can be from other road users or other passengers. We are responsible of the passengers, not of the software that is driving.
I
So it's
see.
different angles.
So maybe it's a good time, actually, after everything you said, to dig more into what kind of models exist. And as I mentioned, this document from SFCTA, so it's San Francisco County Transportation Authority, that have produced a document called Conceptual Framework for AV Safety, something like that. I'll put the link in the description of the episode. And they propose a way AVs should be regulated, and they are actually struggling in San Francisco. And San Francisco is really interesting use case for AVs because a lot started there, and still some operations are starting there. But also there is still a lot of friction with the city, because there is complaint that the vehicles are stopping, are blocking lanes, are blocking emergency vehicles, or that the interaction with first responders is not smooth enough, etc., etc. So there have been multiple cases that have created this safety issue. I mean, when it is blocking an emergency vehicle, it's quite clear, but sometimes it's a lot about feeling, what you said before, of like, oh, why is the vehicle stop here? And people may take then an action to overtake the vehicle because they don't understand how it behaves, things like that. And this has been really pointed out by SFCTA, among others. They have proposed this framework, which I find still super interesting. But for me, I'm wondering, like the big issue they have is that they don't have a regulatory power over autonomous vehicles in San Francisco. It's dealt only at Californians at the state level by the DMV and CPUC. The DMV is a department, motor vehicles, that really deal with the vehicle itself, and the CPUC is dealing with the commercial services. And they have already kind of levels to be reached to be able to get more and more permits linked with the ODD, linked with the performance of the vehicles, and super important, the vehicle miles driven. And I know you like this topic because we discussed already that it may not be a proof for safety that you have driven a lot of miles. And I'd like to hear your view more on that. But back to SFCTA, they propose kind of this framework as a way to get more power and what they would like to see more from the vehicles. But again, I'm struggling seeing that being applicable. And isn't it a risk that the city will get overwhelmed by having to deal with all this operation? And imagine there will be not only Waymo and Zoox, but like more and more players coming. How will they deal with that? So that's where I think kind of an independent assessor or an operator could be useful. So yeah, I'd love to hear your view, particularly on the roles that you see from your European experience of the roles that could play cities, and if it may not be also too much for them. And the other part, what's your view on these kind of progressive levels, like building level up? It's almost like a video game, like
Exactly.
you need some points to be able to go until you reach like the boss level. Maybe that's a comparison that can be made. And I know you had some thoughts on that. And so both aspects, the role of the city or this kind of level approach to gain trust at the end. It's about trust and demonstrating safety. So wherever you want to start, it's a lot and it's a bit different kind of approach.
Maybe first by the level approach. As you know, I love it and I use it. That's how I go with the AV providers I work with in the last 10 years. I think that's very smart. And that's a way to first get to know the tech providers you work with and go step by step and not do only paperwork at the beginning. Because yes, I'm a paper guy, and we haven't said that yet, but when I see a vehicle driving, an AV driving, I hear a lot of people say, you see, it can drive, so it works. No, doesn't mean it works. It means it can drive a few minutes for a drive. It's fun, it's extraordinary, but it doesn't mean it's safe enough. It doesn't mean it can scale. And I have a lot of examples with that. So often my first questions in my first weeks with an AV providers is only papers. To assess safety, is it safe enough? And then we go step by step because it's important to go on the field and, as we said earlier, to continuously monitor to see if we can go further. So yes, I think the video games approach and to for different steps or levels is very smart, and you have specific metrics that you can look at to validate the next phase. For example, I have a checklist with different steps. For example, can we go on open road? Can we put passengers on board? Can we remove the safety operator from the vehicle? So these are different steps, big steps. Then you can imagine steps like growing the ODD or putting standing passengers in the vehicles. And
but then
for each,
who decides on where to put the threshold? Like how is it visible after how many miles, after which events or non-events probably? Do you say, okay, it's enough and let's move to the next phase? It's kind of tricky.
It's very tricky, and by experience, it's very different when it's the authority or the operator or the tech provider that is speaking. Very different. Sometimes I heard, yeah, it's L4, you can drive without anyone on board. And when I look at it, let's do it step by step. And that links with the second question you have. What is the authority we have and the opportunity we have to have data and to challenge the providers? In Europe, as you said, we are organized with PTAs, local authorities that have a contract with the PTO that operates and take a provider, an AV provider. So the AV provider can sell its vehicle and an autonomous driving license only if the operator is willing to use the vehicles in its contract. So we have kind of natural authority on the provider, and we can challenge them. Most of the time it's difficult at the beginning, but then they understand it's a win-win. And this is how you build trust with the local ecosystem, by having a local, as you said, third party that is monitoring and assessing the deployment and the service to make sure it's well integrated in the local ecosystem.
Many transit agencies in the US would really beneficiate from the technology, mostly, for as a feeder, first last mile services, for paratransit, for microtransit. There are many, many use cases that could be really, it could be a big contribution to have AVs and to at least explore the technology. How would you start, and would you need this third-party integrator, or how? Yeah, because the risk I see is if they contact directly AV providers, they may also get some kind of a deployment, but may not match exactly their expectations.
Yeah, they can try to ask for, as a condition, ask for specific reporting, dashboard, and metrics to follow. Maybe not publicly, but at least at the local authority level to look to. When you have a third party, it can build more trust, and I think it's, as I said, a win-win also for tech providers, because if it's a third party that is pushing their technology, it's always better for everyone.
Yeah, and for competition as well among themselves.
Yeah. So you can compare. It allows comparison with the exact same metrics. That's something that I really wanted, because in my experience, it's impossible to compare different operations, different cities, different services, or different vehicles. When you have those kind of metrics, you can compare everything and challenge and improve. The goal is not to challenge to say you're good or you're bad. It's to globally improve. There are a lot of industries where, again, performances and safety are shared. Maybe not with the old public, but with authorities, it is shared to be able to feed a common good to improve. Because as you saw, and you said it at the beginning, if you have an accident, it will be very bad for obviously the company that had the accident, but for the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. No, I can see that definitely, and how this type of metrics is necessary. Still, I'm curious to see how it will evolve in the US, and having kind of a sorting between the information that should be publicly available for the trust that we mentioned already, for this feeling. A big part of my work these days is on safety perception, and actually safety perception is one of the argument for like choosing between one mode or the other. Taking the bus at night in certain areas, sometimes some people will say, no, I don't feel safe. I prefer to take a cab or a Waymo because I feel more safe doing so. It's just an example, but safety perception has really like an impact on,
it has.
On how people move around. So I get it that the authorities feel like they have to take care of kind of the social good and of what that people feel safe, the way their city is organized, etc. But still, how much data should be shared? It's really like there's still some granularity and some work to be done based on everything you said, by the way. And I think you are helping really making that a bit clearer, that there could be these layers of a third party that can
Manage the data and
exactly
simplify the complexity of the operation and of the technology, simplify this complexity to a standardized dashboard for cities.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's a good way to also advertise your work and what you're working on. And I would advise people to reach out to you directly if they want to do so and dig more into this topic. As a very last question to end this episode, I'm also working on a quarterly update on the different AV services around the world. And I wanted to ask you, what are the ones that you find interesting these days? Which are the ones that you are following up more closely than others? Are there any AV deployment that you're kind of intrigued by? So is there anything worldwide worth watching more closely?
Obviously, looking at how Waymo manage the scale and the number of different cities and how do they approach the European approach. I saw that, they chose to attack through UK and not directly European Union. And I think that's not for nothing. So very curious to see how they will go there
And there's a
how
market
they
in
will
Europe.
tackle everything that we discussed. And also curious about, so first there is Waymo, and then we have also the Chinese actors come in Europe, and it feels like the American actors at home in the US, in California, the Chinese are at home in China, and maybe Europe will be the battlefield to define the state of the art of operations. Maybe not driving technology, but at least how do we operate? How do we build that trust?
Interesting. I like it.
Because it's more in the culture. So maybe that will be
a battlefield back to the
I
video
don't
game
like
comparison.
the word, but where everything will melt and the different cultural approach will merge. And I think that's very interesting to be there and to see all of these different actors trying to come and all saying I'm the best in the world. Don't look at what I do. It will be fantastic. It will be L4 without operators on board tomorrow. And
the
seeing
reality
that
is different.
Yeah, the reality is far different, but it's very interesting to be there, obviously.
Cool. Yeah, we'll need more episodes to monitor using the right word on which deployments will come and what's come next in Europe. And in the US, I really hope we're going to see more shuttles. That's my hope. And even if I know Waymo has these new vehicles and some other providers are experimenting different form factors, like more shared mobility would be great, and more transit agencies, like public authorities, being willing to try things. That's
integrate this tech. Because as I said in the introductions, for me, and that's what drives me, that's a fantastic opportunity to improve shared mobility in public transportation. It's been a long time, in decades and decades, it hasn't been improved a lot, and it needs to be improved
Yeah.
to compete with just driving your car.
Yeah, absolutely. We share a view on that. That's my wish
And
too.
mobility solutions for people also outside of cities. In cities, you have a lot of solutions, but outside of cities, we need
Yeah.
solutions. People need solutions. So that will help.
Yeah, let's maybe take that for another episode. The rural mobility US has so much of these cases where there is no infrastructure as well for transit, so we'll need something else. So let's take that for the next episode. Thanks a lot, William. It was great, and I really advise everybody to reach out to you and get to know better about your work and just your mindset. I think it's very insightful for this type of discussion. So I wish you luck in everything you'll be developing, and we keep in touch definitely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.